Why, hello there, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. My name is Mr. Dogboat333, and welcome back to Hearts Around 4, the New World Order, the Ruin, as the United Kingdom. In our last video, we got our credit rating improved, which is very good timing because we're getting working on our economy stuff. Now it's getting very, very messy, to say the least. But we're trying our best. Like, it's kind of coming along, I think. Let me rephrase. Let me be careful when we say that, because we're meeting none of our budgetary concerns. We don't have we're getting unemployment down, but it's not quite low. We're very close with inflation. Like, very close, but not close enough. And GDP growth, we're struggling with even. It's just going downhill, I'll be honest. It is really not going well. I'm not quite sure what we can do to improve things there. Administrative offices. Yeah, I really don't know what we can do better. When Wilson strode into his office, smiling in that oh-so-sly way he had seemingly mastered, and said he had gotten them a meeting, Butler was apprehensive. He barely trusted Wilson, let alone the unions. Now waiting for Leaders for Life, he remained cautious. He had a better view of the unions than most of the BBP, though that didn't say much considering his opposition were those who wanted to ban them and others who wanted to shoot them. He tolerated them, even liking a few of the leaders, but ever since the war he could never look at them without being reminded of their revolutionary elements, those who wanted to shoot him and stick his head on London Bridge. Regardless, he still acted as the best connection to the cabinet had to the unions, and if this meeting got him closer to number 10, so be it. 5 men entered his office, all clearly from working-class backgrounds or ages. Faces aged visibly past their years, and their suits tight and ill-fitting. And their eyes, Butler looked into them and saw mistrust. Well, he'd expected that, but one he saw visible, burning hatred. He had predicted that they would mistrust him, but that kind of hatred was unexpected. Maybe that man was a member of resistance, barely holding back from shooting Butler there and then, or maybe another benign reason. He suspected it didn't matter, and with visible tension, the discussion started. The discussions went on for hours, Wilson sliding in whenever it was clear an argument may erupt. In the end, Butler agreed to work on legislation to improve pay and working conditions in the factory, and to negotiate with the companies on their behalf. As they exited the room, giving crocodile smiles, he feared that all this discussion was pointless, that they would turn on him the moment an opportunity presented itself. Butler pushed his worries aside. He supported these past 20 minutes made him a cynic, but then again, a cynic is what an idealist calls a realist. Well, let's work on commitment and clarity. Though Fontaine's ramble may call them traitors or wolves in sheep clothing, unions are not inherently evil. While it's true that they have been often used to ferment dissent against a rightful government, we know that they are made up of hard-working, loyal British workers. Yet we know we cannot allow for the specter of communism to grow in unions again. To avert this, a new law will be proposed, one that sets up certain regulations that will make sure that they are not used against us in any uprising. Meteorology was rarely a rewarding career. David's father told him this when he decided to study at Liverpool. He had said that some other scientists would be more rewarding of his talents, that he deserved better. Yet David had his passions, and he had graduated all the same. 20 years on, with much less hair and much more bitterness, he often wondered if his father was right. Even without the added stresses of a German invasion had almost put David out of job because of employment guidelines, the career was a thankless, joyless job. On top of that, funds had been extremely limited. David's 2 decades of work were unremarkable. Nothing of the groundbreaking discoveries he had set out to make all those years ago, just largely uninteresting weather reports. As he pulled up to the office in his cheap car, there was no reason to think today would be any different from the myriad others he had been wasting away here. And as he looked through the patterns, through the recent data, his brow began to furrow severely. Grim patterns were emerging in the forecasted weather for the next year. More and more winds blowing from the east, lower temperatures the lot. All these scattered reports that led him to one dark conclusion. A truly awful winter was coming to Britain, one that the country hadn't seen in a century. He frantically went to work writing a report that detailed the worsening weather alongside the measures that could be put in place to avert disaster. As he went to post this letter, he could only hope that the men in Downing Street would take the warnings to heed. In London, the paper was received swiftly and pasted in a ministerial box. It was quickly forgotten. Just another warning of doom quickly forgotten. Winter is coming. All right. Andrew Fontaine was on his fourth meeting of the morning. John Bean was rattling off excuses like he was disappointed to hear. Jeffrey Ham was snapping at them like a rabid dog, and the specter of Rab Butler haunted them. Somewhere in the hallway outside the room, an argument erupted. There were so many these days, they had to tune it out. Thus, they did not hear the argument drawn closer. They were deaf to the calls of, "Please, sir," and "They're in a meeting," that approached the door. They were caught of surprise when the door swung open. "Mr. Fontaine," said Gerald Wallop, flanked by a smirking K. Chesterton and a stoic Hastings Russells. "How do you do?" "What the fuck are you doing here?" snarled Ham, his nostrils flaring. "Can't you see we're in the middle of a meeting?" "Forgive the intrusion, but we have an important request." Chesterton turned his head to Fontaine, flashing a hungry smile. "Lord Portsmouth would like to ask you for your official support in his bid for MP." Fontaine laughed, hollow in pain. "Get out of here, Wallop. I don't have time for this." "Then you should make time. Why, Noel Kane pledged his own support to our cause a half-hour ago." Bean blinked at Chesterton, who spared his protege the indignity of a sideways glance of pity. A great shudder rattled Fontaine. "But no, you're lying." "Quiet, you whelp." Wallop's tone knocked him out of bounds. "This nonsense between you and Butler has put the entire government in jeopardy. You bicker and fight, and it consumes everything around you. As if we did not just crawl out of one civil war. You've proven yourself incapable of putting these paper pushers in their place. And now it's our responsibility to clean up your mess." Well, I think that's going to limit chaos from going higher. As long as we don't go past here, we'll be okay, I think. Do I want to go ahead and... I think I read Birmingham last video. It started to blend together a little bit. Let's check out Liverpool. Liverpool's true history began as a borough by the name of Liverpool, founded by the charter of King John Lackland. Despite modest beginnings, Liverpool would eventually swell to second city in Britain, with riches brought by trade coming to docks from across the Atlantic. In recent years, that trade to its docks has trickled to near nothing, along with Liverpool's good fortunes. Cut off from transatlantic trade and ravaged by the Nazi Blitz, a perpetual sense of gloom has fallen over the city, along with the German boot. Now, what wealth remains flowing not to the city, but to well-dressed, smiling men from Frankfurt? Yet Liverpool's longing for across the sea is not yet dead. In rundown pubs and ancient clubs, young men pick up their instruments and play defiance against the gloom of the city, emulating the American bands from across the Atlantic. For all that Liverpool has lost in its chains, defiance endures. There we go. Ben quietly shuts the door, not wanting to wake up his mother this time. Shifts to the factory, getting later and later, which meant she often ended up falling asleep before he got back. Slinging his raggedy bag on the kitchen table, he walked over to the pantry, feeling absolutely famished after a day of non-stop laboring. Those German taskmakers did not like to let up for anything, it felt like. Still, money was money. He pondered, taking out some bread, margarine, and preserved meat from the cupboard. He was a fit and healthy lad, and it was just him and his mum. If he didn't bring any money, then nobody would, and the bills would go unpaid. But as he spread the margarine onto the bread, he couldn't help but wonder one thing. How many more nights like this? How long would it be until he went to bigger and better things? Would he stay to stay in the city until the day he died, like Dad did. Shaking his head, Ben sat down and tucked into the sandwich. The ingredients were all extremely cheap, but after a shift, it could have been a 5-star meal in his eyes. It would be the same day tomorrow, and the same again tomorrow, and the same the day after that. Maybe on Sunday he'd be able to properly relax for once. The fire for youth is hard to keep dimmed. Well, I'll have to stay dimmed for now. So working on that. The oncoming storm. It was late in the evening that the cabinet of the UK was called in for emergency meeting by the Prime Minister, who all who could attend were quickly rushed through London's chilly streets to Downing Street, where Donville anxiously awaited them, tormented by the knowledge of what was to come. To be putting it plainly, gentlemen, we're about to be facing the worst winter since the days of George II, said Donville, relieved that most of the cabinet had been able to come, Fontaine and Butler among them. Projections show that if we fail to act, hundreds could die of the cold, as our energy grid is strained to the breaking point. In a worst-case scenario, whole villages could freeze to death as heating fails. We need to move quickly and mobilize our workers to increase energy output, suggested Fontaine, drawing approval from many of those assembled. With proper motivation, our miners should be able to temporarily increase our coal reserves enough that we can meet the increased demand. For once I agree with you, Andrew, said Butler, surprising his rival. However, we should look to see if our German friends can't help us through this crisis as well. We are in a unity pact, after all. They can't exactly refuse to help an ally in need. Over the next few hours, the emergency response plan was drawn up and sent out to relevant ministries to implement as a priority. Wells pleased to see the cabinet working together. For once, Donville knew that this was only the beginning of what was needed to counteract a potential crisis before it became a real one. There was something else, though, something that unsettled him as he lay in bed that night. Was this merely a bad start to the year? Or a sign of things to come? Britain needs a doctor, now more than ever. A new crisis will appear in the workshop of the world. Well, let's get this pumped up as much as we can. We got all these checked out. We happen to just have these checked out too, which is incredibly convenient. We have about 90 days left to finish this up, it looks like. Good to know. Anyway, let's go ahead and get working on greasing gears. Thanks to the ever-diligent efforts of Butler, Bean, and our ever-loyal civil servants, our economy is on the upturn again, and finally on the path to final recovery. The reconstruction we started so long ago is near completion, yet our work has only just begun. With our economy once again roaring back to life, we can finally turn to not just creating a stable economy, but a truly prosperous one. We can now turn to transforming our economy into being more than just a subsidiary of the Reich, and into a European economic power. For our newfound prosperity, British markets will once again fill the markets of Europe. Another night, another call. The recent winter had plunged the government into a state of crisis. Everyone had been sent into panic, with practically every department working overtime to try and stop people from freezing to death. The RAF was no exception, although their work was less bureaucratic than many. Michael and his squad had already been forced to airlift 5 people from their frozen-over homes in the last 3 days alone. Such was the state of the country. When reports of snowbound policemen that caught in the snap freeze whilst training new recruits came in, the piles were once again sent out into the biting cold. You could feel the frost seeping into the rattly machine. Would it have killed the engineers to have added some sort of insulation to those things? As a way to distract themselves from the cold that would have them all shaking in their boots, Michael got to talking with co-pilot Sam, as he often did. We were really bloody unprepared for this, you know. I mean, my mother almost froze to death in her home last week. Barely survived, she did. The government my ma grew up with wouldn't have been this poorly prepared. Hell, maybe it's just this government, Sam said. They've been blundering from one crisis to the next. Even I could run Britain better than those smug lords. Maybe your ma was right. Maybe we do need. An explosion ripped through the Northumbrian skies. Remains of a helicopter crashed down into the nearby field. After a short and swift investigation, the resistance was found to be guilty of the crime. Another government spokesperson quickly denounced the crime, arguing that only with the strong hand of the PPP could order be restored to Britain and keep it safe from threats such as these. Another few bodies to add to the count. Our poverty rate is not very good. It's with great regret that the government reports a number of shortfalls and setbacks from the implementation of economic plans for 1962. Andrew Fontaine barely paid attention to Butler's excuses. Whatever he said, the numbers from his department spoke more plainly. He failed to meet his precious goals, and now the economy was weak. There remained stone-faced, projecting an aura of determination. All around him were frustrated colleagues. Half the backbenchers in front of Fontaine wore frowns so deep they looked like the corners of their mouths had been weighed. The government pledges to redouble its efforts to meet new goals, which we will outline presently in the 1963 budget. Nothing less than a shake-up of our departments will be necessary to deliver our promises of sustained growth and full employment. Fontaine's eyes locked briefly with Domville, who sat behind Butler. There was a mutual disappointment there, sealed by a single shrug from the Prime Minister. Finally, thought Fontaine, he's starting to realize it. The glance broke away quickly, and both men returned to Butler. The government further pledges that we will revisit and deepen our existing relationship with industry leaders, particularly those from the German corporations, to ensure that prosperity remains an achievable state. Butler was cooler than Fontaine expected. He was anticipating a waterfall down the Chancellor's shamed face. Perhaps he still thought he had the situation under control, that next year might right the wrongs of this year. But all those numbers he relied upon to prove his worth said otherwise. In this, there was an opportunity for Fontaine. If so-called pragmatists were also empty rhetoric, then why not sign up for the more exciting rhetoric? A misstep. Nothing more. Yeah, let's focus on not freezing to death right now. We're getting there. I think it'll be okay. Can I not increase more? This is a public broadcast regarding the practice of coal hoarding and what you can do to stop it in your community. Observe in the graph to your right the average recorded winter temperature from Britain in the year 1800 to the present. Temperatures such as the current years can lead to rapid hypothermia if not insulated, which unless dealt with promptly will lead to slurred speech, confusion, organ failure, and unconsciousness, followed by death. Hypothermia occurs when the body heat loses its heat and needs to regulate itself, and is caused by prolonged exposure to extremely cold temperatures. To prevent hypothermia in your community, it is critical that your community maintain its local supply of government-issued coal, and that your government obtains its regular rations issued by your community's local council. To ensure a steady supply of government coal for all families, citizens are advised to keep watch for coal hoarders. What is a coal hoarder? A coal hoarder is an individual in your community who, by theft or bribery, attempts to solicit coal not assigned to them, either for themselves or provided to terrorist cells operating in coal locations. Coal hoarders and coal thieves operate by taking coal from your community directly, and be conclusively traced back to decrease the coal rations in several communities. What can you do to stop coal hoarders? Coal hoarders should not be confronted directly, as a number have been linked to terrorist activity. To keep your community safe, you can do the following. 1. Report homes heated in regions deemed non-critical by the government. If there are homes in your neighborhood heated despite non-critical conditions, it's likely that the home is being heated with stolen coal. 2. Take only your allotted ration of coal. Coal theft is a criminal offense and will be met with the harshest legal penalties. 3. Report suspected coal hoarders to your local law enforcement or constable. Only with your help can they identify coal hoarders and stop them from hoarding the community. Only you can keep your community safe from coal theft. I'm hoping we can keep our community safe from, well, death. That's what I'm worried about, really. But we'll have to worry about that next time, because I gotta end it here. Thanks always for watching, my friend. If you like this video, like. If not, feel free to dislike. If you want to see more of this kind of future, hit the sub button. And the notification bell. I upload weekdays as well, occasionally Saturdays. Any comments or feedback, leave them in the comment section below. I read all comments and appreciate anything you got to have for me. Check out my various links down in the description box below, and that's going to be it for now, my friends. I thank you all for watching. My name has been Mr. Dogboat333, and I'll see you all next time. Kal-El.